that there's one standard of the law, and that everybody...
Time of the gentleman has expired. Would the Attorney General like to respond to the innuendo?
No, all I can say is I completely agree, and to avoid any kind of conflict of interest.
But you will not submit to an ethics inquiry.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Well, I would just point
Time of the gentleman has
it wasn't
expired.
innuendo, it was a question.
Thank you.
It was a question.
The question is
And the editorial comments from the chair about other people's questions is not appreciated by this side of the aisle.
Source for this, for the very first line in your memo.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Was the School Board Association letter.
The question is, the thing that has concerned many of those parents that are showing up at these school board meetings, the very basis of their objection and their vigorous debate, as you mentioned earlier, is the curricula, the very curricula that your son-in-law is selling. So to millions of Americans, I mean, my constituents, I was home all weekend, I got an earful about this. They're very concerned about that. Subpart E of that federal regulation says an employee of the executive branch is discouraged from engaging in conduct that's likely to affect the financial interest of someone close to them. Your son-in-law, your daughter, clearly meets that definition. And so the question is, did you follow that regulation? Did you have the appropriate agency ethic official look into this? Did you seek guidance as the federal regulation requires?
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of violence.
Understand that, but did you seek ethics counsel before you issued a letter that directly relates to the financial interest of your family? Yes or no?
This memorandum does not relate to the financial interests of anyone. It's against.
I take that as a no. I take that as a no.
Memorandum is against violence and threats of violence.
Will you, Mr. Attorney General, will you commit to having the appropriate ethics designee review the case and make the results public?
This memorandum is aimed at violence and threats of violence.
I understand your talking point. You're not answering my question, Mr. Attorney General. With all due respect, will you submit to an ethics review of this matter, yes or no?
There's no company in America, or hopefully no law-abiding citizen in America, who believes that threats of violence should not be prevented. There are no conflicts of interest that anyone could have.
According to you, but sir, with due respect, that's the purpose of the federal regulation. We need objective third parties to review our activities. You don't get to make that decision yourself. It doesn't matter. You're the chief law enforcement of this country. This raises questions in the minds of millions of Americans, and your impartiality is being called into question. Why would you not submit to a simple ethics review of that?
I am exquisitely aware of the ethics requirements.
But you're not following them.
I have followed them and lived with them for the last 25 years.
Did you seek an ethics review of this or not?
I'm going to say again, there are no conflicts of interest involved when the Justice Department...
Okay. According to you, I got that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you are not respecting our rules, our constitutional norms, and the federal law that directly applies to your activities. This is a great concern. This is why people are losing faith in our institutions. They're losing faith in this Department of Justice. And you and I both know, as constitutional attorneys, that if the people lose their faith in our system of justice, if they lose their faith in the idea that justice is blind, that there are not two standards, that there's one standard of the law, and that everybody...
Time of the gentleman has expired. Would the Attorney General like to respond to the innuendo?
No, all I can say is I completely agree that the rule of law and respect for it is essential. And I will always do everything possible to uphold that and to avoid any kind of conflict of interest.
But you will not submit to an ethics inquiry.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Well, I would just point out,
Time of the gentleman has
it wasn't
expired.
innuendo, it was a question.
Thank you.
It was a question.
The question is
And the editorial comments from the chair about other people's questions is not appreciated by this side of the aisle.
Is there any connection, Mr. Attorney General, with the school board letter and then 5 days later your memo to regarding school board issues?
Obviously, the letter, which was public and asked for assistance from the Justice Department, was brought to our attention, and it's a relevant factor in...
When did you first review the data showing this so-called disturbing uptick?
So I read the letter, and we have been seeing over time threats...
Whoa. I didn't ask you. So you read the letter. That's your source?
So let me be clear. This is not a prosecution or an investigation.
Is there some study, some effort, some investigation someone did that said there's been a disturbing uptick, or you just take the words of the National School Board Association?
Well, the National School Board Association, which represents thousands of school boards and school board members, says that there are these kind of threats. When we read in the newspapers reports of threats of violence, when that is in the context of threats of violence...
The source for this, for the very first line in your memo...
Time of the gentleman has expired.
...was the School Board Association letter.
Expired, Mr. Deutsch.